Ladies and gentlemen of Earth, your world has been taken over. Right in front of your faces, right underneath your noses. You were lied to, you believed it. You believed it because the masses are largely herd-minded, unthinking animals that haven't stepped into using the faculties that their creator gave them of logic and deductive reasoning, thinking for themselves, independent thought, and critical thought. You've believed what has been told to you by the talking heads on the media, by your government. And because you have believed what has been forced down your throat, put in front of you, propagandizing you, beating you upon the head with the same narrative over and over and over again, you have effectively allowed your entire planet to be taken over. You have allowed the entire economic system of your planet to be eviscerated right in front of your faces. Ladies and gentlemen of Earth, you have been taken over in a communistic, Bolshevik-style takeover, and you don't even know it. There's many people out there that do, and they've been trying to tell you, and nobody wants to listen. Nobody wants to accept the truth. Because since 9/11, there's been an awful lot of us tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorists that have been pointing out all this stuff about what they're doing, about what government's doing, about the absolute fuckery of what government's doing to remove our rights, reduce our rights, and this applies to the entirety of the Western world. Think about Europe and Canada and Australia if you have been paying attention to the geopolitics and what has been being done by the governments of each of these respective Western world locations. Ladies and gentlemen of the world, your planet has been taken over right underneath your noses, right in front of your faces. Your lives have been fundamentally changed and altered, and you didn't even put up a fight. You just laid down, rolled over and acquiesced like a good dog. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the world, you are ultimately going to suffer the consequences of your inactivity because you have no idea of the history of the mechanism that is moving upon the earth to take away your freedoms and to fundamentally change your lives. It is Bolshevism, it is communism, it is Zionism, it is death. It is death. And since you didn't know it, and you didn't stop it, and it's gotten so far into your countries to the point that they've all been taken over to allow what we see unfolding now, the penalty that is going to be paid by all of us is going to be far more than any of us would have ever imagined. It's that bad. And because you don't know your history, you don't have the knowledge that should put the fear of God in you, that would actually be the motivating force that would likely get you off your ass to engage the world and to take the power out of the hands of these psychopathic. You don't know what Bolshevism is, and you don't know what happened when Bolshevism went through Russia, and you don't know that every time Bolshevism and communism get set up in a country, it starts to grind its population through the meat grinder. And it has killed, when you look at Russia, depending on the source, it has killed between 60 and 100 million people during that Bolshevik takeover. Look at what that country has been since those days. It was left in ruin, in despotism, for years. Millions of Russians were purposefully starved, and the ones that weren't were brutalized, murdered, raped, beaten, and killed in the most horrific of ways. It is almost unfathomable that this stuff actually takes place. Ladies and gentlemen of the world, because you don't know enough about the history of your own planet and the evil that moves upon the earth, you don't know about the Bolshevik takeover of Russia. You don't know about how the Bolsheviks took communism, which is a tool, an ideological tool, and it brought it into China. Ladies and gentlemen of the world, because you don't know that Mao killed between 60 and 90 million of his own Chinese people. You don't have the information, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have what it would take for you to understand the severity of the position that you are in the Western world. You don't have the anger, the fire to take action against the people who have taken over your world right underneath your noses, right in front of your faces, because you don't know the details of what Mao did. You don't understand what happened to those Slavic countries and countries like Poland and what communism did in those countries once it got set up and got its grip, got its hooks into those cultures. You don't understand how it fundamentally changed, in many respects, the ideologies of all these countries, from Russia to China to Europe, Venezuela, Cuba, and the countries countries in China, or not China, Asia, the Asia-Pacific Rim, the Asian Rim, where communism is big. Ladies and gentlemen of the world, once these Zionist, communist, Marxist, Bolshevik people that have controlled the world, that have taken over the world, once they get fully what they want in place, they're going to begin to grind the rest of the Western world into paste in the same way it has always unfolded in Russia, in China, in the Eastern Bloc of Europe, in Cuba, in Venezuela, and every other country. That is what they're going to do. The Georgia Guidestones allude to wanting to reduce the world's population. And underneath the guise of a common fucking and the fact that the world doesn't know enough about a cold, they've been driven into their homes in fear. You still don't know enough about the reality of the world you live in to be able to completely understand and comprehend exactly what the hell is going on, because you haven't taken the time to take in the information that would give you a foundational understanding of the reality of the world you fucking live in, who's been moving in it, what their ideologies are, and what they've been aspiring to do since, well, we'll say since at least September 11th of 1990, when Daddy Bush told everybody in the world the New World Order's coming. And here's your bigger problem, ladies and gentlemen of the world. You've let your last generation be completely mind-fucked to the point of utter impotence. And that generation represents the youth, the men, the people from age 18 to about 35. And when you see a 34-year-old man with a game joystick in his hand, who's more interested in playing games and smoking weed than he is getting up off his ass, you see that all over the Western world. 30-somethings, these millennial people. Most of them, most of them are inactive. Most of them are more interested in many other trivial things that are at the level of life that are still childlike, teenage-like, and lacking maturation. Ladies and gentlemen of the world, because you've allowed your last generation to be attacked so profoundly, they've been rendered impotent. And that generation represents the very fighting-age males. Ladies and gentlemen of the world, when you recognize that all the politicians have gone rogue, when you recognize all the politicians are working for the New World Order, when you finally recognize that, it's going to be too goddamn late. It actually already is. Your planet has been taken over, and you still haven't figured it out yet. They've been looking at the population. They've been looking what kind of resistance they would get. They've been looking. Meanwhile, deceiving and lying, setting everything up, changing and conditioning minds. They've wiped out the middle class. They've wiped out small to medium businesses. And look at what it's done to hospitals. Hospitals are for-profit businesses. There it starts. And the Western world goes away from anything that resembled having rights, having freedoms, having anything that a free human being would want, to becoming more like herd animals in a communistic society where the psychopath rules the world. And the sheep are led to the slaughter. And until then, everything they produce is taken from